Right. Going to go ahead and say greetings to everyone. Would like to formally welcome you to our CMMC compliance using Microsoft Office 365 workshop. My name is Harjot Singh, and I am a CMMC Business Development Manager here at InterSec Inc. Moving forward. On today's agenda, we're going to get started with a company introduction. Then we're going to go ahead and move into a brief introduction into Microsoft Office 365 so we can understand what we're looking at here today. Then we're going to have a discussion on Microsoft Office compliance, and we're going to end today with a demo on one of Microsoft Office's features, which will give you a bit more insight into the compliance itself. Moving forward, let's begin with our company introduction. So a little bit about us. InterSec Inc. was incorporated in 2013 in Ashburn, VA. We are a boutique cybersecurity service provider for commercial, state, and federal clients. We have a lot of different quality certifications, which include CMMI SVC3, ISO 27001, ISO 9001, and we are a CMMC-AB registered provider organization and a C3PAO candidate, as well as a Virginia Gen Edge CMMC BPA contract holder. Our services include assessment, advisory, consulting, and managed security services for CMMC and beyond. So before we get into the intricacies of Microsoft Office 365 and its compliance, let's go ahead and understand what CMMC is first. It might still be a new concept for many, and it is also sometimes confusing to understand. So it's best that we establish that base level of understanding for CMMC before we move into anything specific. So CMMC officially stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, and it encompasses multiple maturity levels, which range from basic cybersecurity hygiene to advanced. Now, the CMMC effort is going to build upon an existing standard, which is NIST 800-171, and I'm sure many of you are already familiar with this one. Now, the difference is that NIST 800-171 was based off of trust. If you did the security requirements for that, you were trusted that you were complying with those requirements. CMMC changes everything in regards to NIST 800-171. Even though it is similar in implementation, it's going to be adding a verification component through auditors and other various auditing processes to ensure that security standards are being met with. Currently, CMMC is at the version 1.02, but it continues to update. So make sure you're keeping up to date with that. And the biggest thing to understand is that CMMC is meant to be cost effective and affordable for small business to implement at the lower CMMC levels. Now that we've understood what CMMC is, why is CMMC important? Now, as many of you understand, the NIST 800-171 standard was important for a lot of different DoD contracts as to be able to implement for your business. And now CMMC is going to be the exact same thing with even more emphasis on that importance. Any DoD contractors who deal with CUI or FCI data are going to need to become CMMC certified by passing a CMMC audit, hence the verification process. And since November 30th, 2020, DoD has mandatory CMMC and NIST 800-171 compliance requirements in some of its acquisitions of goods and services. Now, it's important to note that CMMC requirements aren't going to be just for DoD. They're being adopted into other federal contracts and are continuing to grow into different departments. Even the DHS is planning to introduce CMMC compliance in its acquisitions. So the importance of CMMC is not to be underestimated, because companies that lack a certain CMMC certification are not going to be able to bid or participate in DoD contracts and other contracts as well in the future. So it's important that you work towards CMMC certification as quickly as possible. Now that we've understood the importance of CMMC, let's go ahead and discuss its relation to Microsoft 365 compliance. Before we begin and get into that, let's go ahead and introduce Microsoft Office 365. It's a very popular Office productivity suite. We use it, many other companies use it, and it's used for a variety of different things, whether it be day-to-day operations, communications, and delivery for a lot of business. So when it comes to CMMC compliance, Office 365 is already going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting, which we will show you today and see how it helps to make CMMC compliance that much easier. And for the things that it doesn't help you with, Microsoft is providing you tools that lets you streamline your compliance requirements and needs. as you will see later on. So when it comes to Microsoft Office 365 compliance, there's going to be three key ways that Microsoft is helping you meet CMMC compliance. The first one is going to be the shared responsibility model. The second being the compliance manager, and one of the most important, and three being sovereign enclaves, which include commercial, GCC, and GCC high. We're going to go ahead and go into each and every single one so you can better understand how Microsoft is assisting you. So let's go ahead and begin with shared responsibility. Now, what shared responsibility is it's a cloud security framework that dictates the security obligations of a cloud computing provider and its users to ensure there's accountability. In Microsoft Office 365, shared responsibility is represented by customer improvement actions and Microsoft actions. Out of the box, it's meeting many of the CMMC practices necessary to meet compliance requirements, as you'll see later on in this presentation. And all this shared responsibility means is that you are not solely responsible for CMMC compliance when you're using Office 365. You're going to have a helping hand to better understand their compliance requirements, and you're being provided a lot of tools that get it a lot easier to be compliant. Here's a little chart here that's going to emphasize what I just discussed and how shared responsibility is coming into play. You're going to notice that there are way more actions than CMMC practices. There's going to be two reasons for this. Many practices have multiple actions required in order to properly implement the practice, but some of the actions are also going to be able to meet multiple practices. A good example of this is going to be CMMC practice AC3.021, which is about authorizing remote execution of privileged commands and remote access to security relevant information. This single practice is summarized as authorize remote execution, and it consists of one customer action and two Microsoft actions. So the thing you need to understand is that some of these actions could be simple as ensuring that a password is attached to an account. So even though the number does seem high, it's showing you that the customer action that you would need to do to meet a certain practice, Microsoft is going above and beyond to assist you with that, as you can see with CMMC level 1, where a customer would be expected to do 89 actions, and Microsoft's providing 108. So moving into the compliance manager. The Microsoft Compliance Manager is going to be one of the most important tools that you can use for your compliance when it comes to Microsoft. It's going to be included in the demo that we have later here today, and it's going to be the central hub of information for you to be able to make compliance that much easier. Now, the reason why is that it offers a lot of different tools and abilities to do things for Microsoft that'll make it so much easier, which includes e-discovery, legal holds, sensitivity labeling, a view into compliance issues, being able to verify and classify data, and insider risk management. And then the even bigger thing that Microsoft Compliance Manager provides is that it's going to include a dozen of compliance frameworks. It has a bunch of different templates, which we will highlight later, that allow you to make policy implementation that much easier. And for many of you that might not know, CMMC is big on policy and policy implementation. So for Microsoft to provide you templates, that's going to make your compliance journey so much easier, especially when small to medium-sized businesses don't have enough time to dedicate towards being able to come up with such different templates. But the important thing to note is that Office 365 E5 license Compliance Manager only includes the Microsoft Data Governance Baseline Assessment. Now, that's going to be the default license that all companies are provided when they have the Compliance Manager and sign up for Office 365. We're going to highlight a bit more information about that in the demo, but it's just important to note that not all assessment templates are offered in the base version. Moving forward, we're going to head and show you an introduction to the Compliance Manager. This is just a screenshot that shows what the Compliance Manager looks like. So I'm not going to go ahead and too much and talk about it because we will cover it in the demo. But this is what it would look like if you were to go to the Compliance Center. Now we're going to go ahead and discuss some sovereign clouds for CMMC and NIST 800-171 compliance. When you're attempting to meet more stringent compliance requirements, such as managing CUI, or you're going to the higher levels of CMMC, whether that be CMMC level 3 to 5, you're going to need additional security from your cloud solution provider, in this case, Microsoft. And since Microsoft acknowledges this, they're providing something called GCC High, which is a cloud environment specifically meant to meet the cloud compliance requirements of DoD contractors. Now, it's important to understand that at the base level of what Microsoft is providing, you'll still be able to meet a bunch of CMMC requirements, but it's going to become increasingly difficult as you move further into CMMC levels and you're handling more intense data. And for that, there's GCC high and different levels of compliance licenses that Microsoft offers, which you can see through this graphic here. I'll take a second to let you look at it, but the important thing to note is that this is going to note which versions of Microsoft 365 and Office 365 can meet the associated requirements within CMMC, DFARS, or ITAR. And there's a bunch of different other ones that you can see here as well. Now, the commercial and GCC versions of the platform can be configured to meet NIST 800-171, as I said before, and the vast majority of CMMC requirements with native security products and capabilities. If you look, you can see, if we focus on specifically CMMC, you'll see that CMMC level 1 through 2 is going to be met in the commercial version. It's going to be met in the GCC version. And then when you get into 3 and 5, that's not met in the commercial version, but it is met in GCC and above. And another important thing to note is that the higher levels, which is GCC High and DoD, are going to be in the US sovereign cloud and meant for those high-level government contracts with the DoD. If you look at the DoD CCSRG level, you're going to see that it moves from not requiring a level, going from IL2, IL4 to IL5. And for those of you that don't know, IL2 is about accommodating DoD information that has been approved for public release, which might be low confidentiality or moderate integrity. IL4 covers DoD-controlled unclassified information, which is just CUI. And then IL5 is going to accommodate DoD CUI and national security systems. So you can see that the higher level of Office 365 license you move into, the more requirements you're able to cover. But you can still make commercial work for many of your CMMC needs, which is very important. Now that we've discussed a little bit about what Microsoft can offer you in terms of your compliance, I want to take a second to discuss a checklist that can help you get started on compliance, whether you have not looked into compliance at all in relation to Microsoft Office 365, or maybe you have started and you're a bit confused on where you need to go from where you're at right now. So I would suggest a few things, which we will go into more detail about, which include configuring compliance permissions. Then you want to look into knowing your state of compliance. You want to go ahead and start enabling auditing, creating policies to alert for compliance issues, classifying, protecting your sensitive data, going ahead and configuring a retention policy, then configuring your sensitive information, and then finally, looking at what's happening with your sensitive items. I highly recommend that you do go in this order because it makes the process that much easier. But if you've already done a few things or you haven't done a few things, you can start anywhere where you feel comfortable. Beginning with the first one, which is going to be configuring compliance permissions, you're going to need to know who in your organization has access to what. It's one of the principal introductions to CMMC, which is access control, managing who has access. So when it comes to Microsoft 365, the Compliance Center is going to allow you to do that so much more easier, whether that be who can view content or who can perform management tasks. So what is the first step to do? You should configure your compliance permissions to make sure that that data and that access is being monitored and is being classified. Microsoft's going to provide you administrative roles specific to compliance for using the tools included in the Microsoft 365 Compliance Center. You'll want to make sure that you've assigned the proper people to the Compliance Data Administrator and Compliance Administrator admin roles before you start to configure and implement compliance solutions included with Microsoft Office 365. So start by assigning those compliance permissions, and then you can go and further move on to individual people based off of their needs to prevent unauthorized access. Moving forward, that we're going to discuss knowing your state of compliance. Once you've figured out who can do what, you need to take a step back and see where your organization currently stands in its terms of states of compliance. Whether your organization is new to compliance requirements or has deep experience with standards and regulations, the best thing you can do to improve compliance is understand where your organization stands. Microsoft Compliance Manager is going to provide you an excellent outlook into this, and you will see this in the demo later on as well, to understand your organization's compliance posture, and it's going to let you to highlight areas that you definitely need improvement in. Not only that, but it also serves as a tool to track all of this assessments and where your risks are. So doing that immediately in the beginning of your journey of compliance when it comes to Office 365 is going to make your later journey so much more easier. Then you want to go ahead and start to enable auditing. Once you've determined your organization's current state and who can manage the compliance functions, enabling auditing allows you to ensure that you have the data to conduct compliance investigations and generate reports for your network and user activities in your organization. Enabling auditing is also going to be an important step for the tasks we discussed later on before. Now, audits obviously provide a valuable tool in helping to match your compliance requirements to solutions. And it's important to note that audit logging has to be enabled before activities are recorded or before you can even use the audit log. The audit log also lets you determine when and what information is retained. And by default, usually the admin and user activity for your organization is going to be retained for 90 days. But that number can vary depending on the license you hold for Office 365. When it comes to the next thing that you need to do, you have to create policies to alert you for compliance issues. Microsoft's going to provide several built-in alert policies to help identify various risks, and that alert policies can be accessed through the alert policy and alert dashboard tools, which are available in the Compliance Center. And these allow you to not only use default alert policies, but you can create custom alert policies in accordance to your organization to view and generate alerts when a user performs a certain activity, whether that be sending classified, unclassified information, classified information, or some other confidential information within your organization so that an alert is going to be generated. This can also include admin permission abuse, malware activity, potential external and internal threats, and even information governance risks. For the safety of the user, Microsoft does turn these on by default, but you can, again, configure custom alerts to help manage compliance requirements specific to your organization. And some of the examples you could use is to, again, track user and admin activities, look at permission changes or data loss instances in your organization. Then you want to go ahead and classify and protect sensitive data. To get work done in your organization, people are going to collaborate because collaboration is necessary to perform tasks within and outside of your organization. That means that content can't just stay behind a firewall because it has to roam in different areas, whether that be across devices, apps, or services. And when it is going to roam, you want to make sure it's being done in a secure and protected manner in a way that also meets your organization's businesses and CMMC compliance needs. And the best thing that Microsoft offers for such a thing is sensitivity labels. And again, this is available through the Compliance Center. Now, what these sensitivity labels are going to do is that they're going to let you classify and protect your organization's data, but they're going to do it in a way where your productivity is not going to be hindered at all. You could be in the middle of doing a certain task and the admin could make a sensitivity label that would then be subsequently applied to the information that it needs to be applied to, but it would not hinder any of the productivity, which is the best thing that sensitivity labels can do for you. Now, these sensitivity labels can be used to enforce encryption, usage restrictions, apply visual markings, protect information across platforms and devices, whether that be different apps within Microsoft, on premises, or even offline in the cloud and in the cloud. So sensitivity labels could be super important in perhaps classifying your CUI data or classifying other sensitive information that's going within your organization. From there, you want to go ahead and configure a retention policy. Now, a retention policy is going to let you proactively decide whether you want to retain content, delete content, or if you want to do both, retain it and then delete the content at the end of a specified retention period. These actions might need to comply with industry regulations or internal company policies, as well as reduce the risk of litigation or the data being lost in a security breach. So Microsoft, the Compliance Center, allows you to quickly put a retention policy in place within multiple locations in your Office 365 environment, whether that be Exchange Mail, SharePoint sites, OneDrive accounts, or Office 365 groups. But if you want to get even more selective than that, you can apply a retention policy for specific locations within Office 365 or even on users. So it allows you to be very flexible with where you want to apply a retention policy. And again, you can change the amount of time a retention policy takes action. So there's lots of flexibility when it comes to applying a retention policy. From there, you want to go ahead and begin to configure your sensitive information. Communication compliance is extremely important, and it's something Microsoft is going to highlight repeatedly throughout your use of its communication services. Having communication compliance within CMMC and just in general is going to help minimize the risk of sensitive data leakage by helping you be able to immediately detect anything that's amiss within your organization's communication policies and take remediation actions. This includes mainly for email and Microsoft Team communications. This will include inappropriate communications, which may contain profanity, threats, harassment, and communications that share sensitive information inside and outside of your organization. That's why Microsoft offers a predefined offensive language and anti-harassment policy template, which allows you to scan internal and external communications for things like that might risk your organization's integrity or data. These can be coupled with sensitivity labels, sensitive information type applications, retention labels, and policy and trainable classifiers to, again, heighten the sensitive information and how it's being configured and managed within your organization. This allows reviewers within Microsoft to investigate scanned email, Microsoft Teams, Yammer, or third-party communications in your organization and take appropriate remediation actions to make sure that they're compliant with your organization's standards. At the end of the day, this is ensuring that sensitive information is not being leaked, someone's not being at risk of having their data lost, and your organization's policies are going to stay in place and information is going to stay safe. After all those tasks, you want to see what's happening with your sensitive items. Once you've accomplished what's on this checklist that we've gone through, it's another process of taking a step back and taking a moment to see where you stand. You have to see which items in your organization have been labeled, what actions your users are taking on those sensitive items, what your admins are doing, what permissions are being managed. All of that information is extremely important to be reviewed. And the review process is an important core concept within CMMC and just the scope of cybersecurity itself. Once you've accomplished a certain task, you want to go ahead and review it, ensuring that it matches current cybersecurity practices, matches current CMMC standards, and just in general, matches security standards, whether they be for your organization or overall. And for that, again, Microsoft's going to be offering something called the Content Explorer and Activity Explorer. So what the Content Explorer does is it allows you to view in the native format all of the items that have been classified as sensitive information types or items that belong to a certain classification by a trainable classifier, as well as any items that might have had a sensitivity or retention label applied to them. And what the Activity Explorer does is it helps you monitor what's being done and with your classified and labeled sensitive items across SharePoint, Exchange, OneDrive, and other Office apps. The thing I want you to take away from this final step is that you want to continue to monitor all of these sensitivity labels, manage and change the sensitivity labels and retention policies as needed, and act accordingly with sensitive information, especially if it's at risk of being leaked. With that, we're going to go ahead and move into the demo part of our presentation here. We've briefly discussed what Microsoft offers within its scope to make compliance that much easier for you. And then we've also discussed what different tasks you can take as an organization to make compliance that much easier for you. So now we're going to show you that most impressive toolkit that Microsoft offers, which is the Compliance Center, to make all of these needs that much more easier. Now, the best way to access Compliance Manager if you haven't before is just to type compliance.microsoft.com. There are also some steps listed here below that you can follow, but the best is just going to be to go ahead and do what I'm going to do right now. Compliance.microsoft.com. So here we are at the Compliance Center. And if you look at, this is going to be the homepage that you land at. It's important to note before I go into any information in relation to the Compliance Center that you do need access to access the Compliance Center, because if you don't have the appropriate level of access, it's going to stop you before you can even access this page, saying that you don't have the appropriate permissions within your organization. Now, you have to either be an admin of your organization, or you have to have an admin assign you the proper roles to be able to view the Office 365 Compliance Center. Now, I do encourage you to follow along if you are within the audience and have Microsoft Office 365. But even if you don't wish to follow along, I highly encourage you after this demo to mess around with the Compliance Center and see what different abilities it has to make your CMMC compliance needs that much more easier. So this is going to be sort of like a dashboard that you can use to see what needs to be done within Microsoft Office 365 and your compliance. But the most important tab is going to be this one right here, the Compliance Manager tab. Now, we're using a sample Office 365 account for the demoing purposes. So you're going to see a compliance score that's in league with that certain organization. But what you'll see here is that through this dummy organization, you'll see that there's a 57% compliance score. Before I go into whatever that means, it's important to note that this is not just for CMMC. This score does not indicate that you're 57% compliant with CMMC standards and requirements, because it's taking into note and account other standards and security protocols. So this is a holistic look on how compliant you are with Microsoft and other security standard policies within your organization. But it gives you a good indicator of where you stand. And it's kind of like that emphasis on stepping back and taking a chance to review where you stand with this type of stuff to see where you need to go from there. Right next to it is going to be something called key improvement actions. And this is just going to highlight the most important actions that you as an organization should be putting into implementation to make your compliance score higher and your compliance in general a lot better. It'll give you the information on those various actions, the impact it'll have on your score. You can have test statuses, which I'll also go ahead and highlight in a second. But if you want to see all your improvement actions, just go ahead and click that view improvement actions like I did right now. It's going to take a second to load. And the best thing about it is that you can filter that in accordance to whatever needs you need, whether it be a certain regulation you want to see it by, a certain solution, a certain group, or a certain test status. And for us, or by default, the test status is going to be what has not passed, not been assessed, or failed. So all this various improvement actions, as you can see, there's many different ones, are going to be displayed to you. And then you can go ahead and click on an individual to get more information on that improvement action, as you'll see as it loads. Just give it a second here. Now, here it'll give you an overview about the implementation status for you, which, as we've not done it, it's not implemented. You can set a test status for it, whether it's been tested or not, what points you've gotten out of doing what it asked you to do. And then here is the best part about these individual actions. Microsoft's going to tell you what you need to get done, and it also tells you how to get it done. So here it'll say how to implement it, and it'll tell you what you need to do to get that implemented. But then it also says what sort of different Microsoft solutions you can use to implement those policies. So even if you're not tech savvy, you're not the IT department in your organization, you can still work through the Compliance Center and implement various things through the guidance of Microsoft. Then you can select an implementation status, you can select the date it needs to be implemented, you can set test cases and test statuses, you can look at what standards and regulation it applies to, here being access control, and then you can look at documentation for what, or attached documentation that shows that you have met this requirement, whether that be a screenshot or some other document. Moving forward, there's going to be a lot of other different things you can look at as well, such as reports that let you view statuses and trends for your data compliance within Microsoft 365 across different apps and devices. As you can see, I don't have the permissions needed for that, so permission management is going to be increasingly important to be assigned to, so that whoever is responsible for your Microsoft Office 365 compliance is able to do it a lot more effectively. Then there's going to be information on communication compliance. There's going to be information governance. And this is what I was talking about earlier about labels. So here you can apply retention policies, you can apply sensitivity labels, and those are going to be extremely important for managing your data. Now, it's important to note that it does take a little bit of time for a retention label to take action, because what it does is that it not only applies to future communications or future documents, but it's also going to search within your organization and apply that label on that information that's already there. So Office 365 and Outlook and SharePoint might slow down within that time frame because it's applying this retention policy, sensitivity label, etc., on that information as well. And then there's information on information protection. There's going to be insider risk management. Now, again, some of these things are not available through the base level of what Microsoft offers. So you would have to update to see even more information. But this would just, again, highlight any sort of insider risks. It gives you a records management look. And then there's privacy management. I do, again, highly encourage you all to look through this at your own time so you can better understand what Microsoft is offering when it comes to the Compliance Center. But again, the compliance manager here is going to be the most important part to go over. Before I go ahead and end the demo, the best thing to highlight again that I discussed when we originally introduced Compliance Manager is going to be the assessment and assessment templates it offers. Like I said, at the base level, it's going to offer the data protection baseline governance assessment, which again, still does cover a lot, as you can see, 685 actions, 694 improvement actions. So even in the default level, you can make CMMC level 1 and 2 compliance because it's offering that much information for you. The biggest thing that Microsoft offers in GCC High and other higher licenses is going to be the assessment templates. As you can see, only the data protection baselines offered for the baselines, but then there's so many more premium templates, 676 templates for other security standards and information that you can apply. As you can see, NIST 800-53, there's going to be NIST 800-53 revision 5. There is also CMMC levels, which I'm going to scroll down to show you right now. CIS implementation groups 1 through 3. Then you can see CMMC level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So of course, it increases. And that's the important thing to note, that it's going to apply and give you assessment templates to make your job so much more easier, as these are really important when it comes time to being audited by CMMC itself. With that being said, that's the end of the demo. And here are some resources on screen once it reloads. Oh, my apologies. Go ahead and go back. Here are some resources on our behalf that allow you to better understand CMMC. You can join our mailing list at intersecinc.com/contact us, where we continually see post CMMC educational content and other information in relation to CMMC. You can follow our LinkedIn to see some blog posts and other information in regards to CMMC. Our YouTube has a bunch of information and educational content on CMMC, specifically its domains and other CMMC compliance. And this video will be uploaded there as well. But the most important thing I'd like to leave you with is, again, that idea of stepping back and reviewing where your organization stands. And for that, we offer a platform called Security Compliance, which allows you to assess your CMMC standing and see where you need to move forward, as well as work towards making you audit ready. If you'd like to check it out, I highly encourage you to go to www.securitycompliance.io, where you can take a free level 1 self-assessment, which allows you to identify the gaps of where you might stand, not only for Microsoft Office 365, but within your organization in general. So it's going to be a wonderful tool to assess yourself. And if you enjoy the platform, offer a guided assessment. And that allows you to see a lot more deep information about what might be offered within the scope of CMMC and how to level up your journey and get towards being CMMC compliant. Thank you all for coming out today, and I extremely appreciate your time. I hope you learned something.